Have you ever stepped into a moment that felt so ordinary at first glance that you barely paid attention to it, only to realize later that something subtle, something quietly life-shifting was taking shape inside it? That's exactly what happened to me on a calm, unhurried Saturday afternoon, when the house was wrapped in a gentle stillness, sunlight sliding in golden strokes across the kitchen tiles, while I prepared the same old chicken casserole I'd been making for decades. Nothing felt unusual when the day began. Emily had gone upstairs to take a phone call, and her boyfriend Mark, still fairly new to our lives, sat in the living room looking polite, slightly nervous, and unsure of where to place his hands. I noticed him glancing around the house as though trying to understand our family through the photographs on the walls. And something about his quiet awkwardness softened me. Wanting to ease the air, I called out to him, asking if he could help me keep the cutting board steady. And the way he stood up, relieved, almost grateful for an excuse to escape the uncomfortable silence, made me smile more than I expected. He stepped into the kitchen with a kind of careful respect, as if the room itself held memories he didn't want to disturb, and when he stood beside me, close enough that I felt the warmth of human presence I'd long grown used to living without, something inside me stirred with a mix of nostalgia and comfort. We chopped vegetables together, and I watched his hands shake just slightly as he tried to copy my technique, his boyish laughter filling the kitchen each time he made a mistake. When our hands brushed accidentally while reaching for the salt. It was such a small, harmless thing, yet it awakened a feeling I hadn't acknowledged in years. Not attraction, not confusion, just the gentle awareness of being noticed. Being present as a woman, and not only as someone's mother or widow. He apologized softly, and I told him it was perfectly fine, but the truth is that fleeting touch lingered somewhere in me, like the faint warmth left behind by sunlight after clouds pass. As we cooked, I shared little stories from Emily's childhood, stories I hadn't told in ages, and he listened with a kind of patience and sincerity that made the memories feel new again. When he told me that our house felt warm, that Emily was lucky to have grown up in a home that breathed comfort, the honesty in his voice touched a part of me that had gone quiet since Tom passed, like someone gently dusting off a shelf I hadn't looked at in years. After the casserole went into the oven, Mark surprised me by rolling up his sleeves and insisting on washing the dishes. I protested, but he didn't budge, and there was something unexpectedly tender in watching someone do such a simple act of care for me, especially after years of doing everything alone. The kitchen filled with a warmth I hadn't realized I'd been starving for. A warmth born not from romance but from simple, shared humanity. When Emily eventually came downstairs and laughed at seeing us working together, she had no idea that something quiet had settled between us, a soft, unspoken shift neither of us intended, yet both of us felt. And later that night, after they left and the house returned to its familiar emptiness, I found myself standing in the dim kitchen, staring at the counter where we had stood side by side, feeling something alive inside beside me, something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a very long time. The next morning only deepened that strange new awareness when I walked into the kitchen, still wrapped in my robe, and found Mark sitting at the table with a cup of coffee, looking just as surprised to see me as I was to see him. Emily had left early, and he'd stayed behind, saying he couldn't sleep because of a project due soon. We ended up talking quietly over our mugs, sunlight warming the room in that soft way early mornings often do, and something about the simplicity of sharing that moment with him. No noise, no rush made the kitchen feel less lonely. He asked about the faded daisies on the table, and when I told him Tom used to bring me flowers every Friday, he listened with a tenderness that made my chest tighten, then quietly admitted he'd grown up without a father and was raised by a mother who carried the world on her shoulders without ever letting him feel the weight of it. The sincerity in his voice, the vulnerability in that confession, made me see him not as Emily's boyfriend, but as a young man who had weathered his own storms. Later that afternoon, when Emily had to leave again and Mark stayed behind, life wove another small, unexpected moment between us. I was wrestling with a stubborn, leaking faucet when he appeared behind me, offering help even though he wasn't sure he knew what he was doing. Watching him crouch beside me, trying to fix something he didn't have to, made me laugh and ache at the same time. And when he actually stopped the leak with a simple twist, he looked so proud that I couldn't help but smile back. We stood a little too close for a breath or two, sharing a silent acknowledgement of something neither of us dared to name. And then I broke the tension by offering lunch, which we cooked together in the same easy rhythm that had begun forming between us. When he reached over me to get a jar from the top shelf, the brush of his arm against my shoulder sent a soft, unexpected warmth through not desire, not guilt, just the reminder that I was still human enough to feel small moments deeply. And when Emily returned, cheerfully unaware, the quiet undercurrent between him and me faded back into the background, unspoken but undeniably real. That night, long after they drove away, I found myself replaying the laughter, the shared stories, the accidental touches. The way he looked at me, not with pity, but with a kind understanding that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't in years. It wasn't love, and it certainly wasn't something inappropriate. It was simply the rediscovery of the parts of myself I had buried beneath routine, grief, and years of being strong for everyone else. And as I stood in the silence of my kitchen, feeling the faint echo of those moments, I understood something I hadn't dared admit. Life wasn't finished with me yet. Something inside me was waking up, gently but undeniably, reminding me that even the smallest connections can open doors we thought had long rusted shut.